Chapter 21, Treatment Neuroses. If you remember, I designated any change in activity because of the psychiatric condition which is not psychotic, is for me, neurotic. There are many kinds of neuroses, but I made one very clear distinction that to treat the underlying neurosis, we must first of all, calm the patient down. Secondly, it is, far more, important to both prevent a relapse and to give a feeling of well-being. We must treat the underlying personality disorder. If we do not prevent the next relapse, it will most certainly occur. I am also saying that most of the time, most of us are living our lives trying to reduce anxiety and pressure, and not actively looking for happiness. For some reason, particularly in my generation, the search for happiness is deemed to be something degenerative. I feel that there are three conditions that we live in: happiness, unhappiness and misery. Because of our automatic everything not being miserable, it is the default situation where most of us think we should be most of the time. If we are never happy, if we never expect to be happy, then we go from unhappiness to misery and back. Compare this with the person who is happy most of the time. When they are not happy, they are merely unhappy and still have another stage to arrive at, misery. More important, the happiness aimer will rectify its position far sooner. Using the language David would have used, so what? And I would answer thus: do you remember what I said about mood and the thermostat sticking? How does the thought-feeling-mood interaction get into a vicious circle? We called it positive feedback. I want to give the thermostat another point in addition to unhappy/not unhappy. I would call that point happiness. So, we have less likelihood of dropping into the unhappy situation. I am going to discuss with you several behavioral changes that we should all undergo. We have to reduce the level of tension. Imagine our anxiety as being a sea. When the level of the sea lowers, the rocks that were placed there by genes or by upbringing will be there for us to run ashore on. I don't want to go into this any further. Time management. There are two specific things that have become part of our automatic everything and increase anxiety levels. The first one is time management. We are completely unable to manage time. We are addicted to our watches, and now our smartphones, as we are glancing all the time at what time it is. One of the first things I suggest you do is to disconnect yourself from your phones and throw your watches away. When you learn to manage time, you will be able to pick cues up from what's going on around you, the news, what people are saying, and if you have doubt, you can ask someone what the time is. When you are anxious, throw away your watch. Try doing it for just one day. Usually, you will feel like an addict who's been taken away from his favorite drug. You can manage very well. After all, we did so 20 years ago without a phone or a watch. Over the weekend, you certainly need rest. The world will go on. Let's talk about time management. It's very simple, and yet, you have to practice it a few times in order for it to sink in. Do not forget, like every change in behavior, you will go through stages including relapse. Now, you are able to go quickly from relapse to the quick stage of recovery. What do I want you to do? Think of what you are about to do. Let's use an example. From bed to the office door. Think of every stage that you undergo from getting out of bed to the office door. Don't go into greater detail. Let's say we divide it up into getting washed and dressed, eating breakfast, getting into the car, splitting up different parts of the journey, arriving at the office, going upstairs or wherever the offices are, and finally, sitting down. Having written the list, right next to each part, how long you think each section is going to take. Read this all over again, and determine if you have given yourself ample time. To each section, add 10%. In other words, if you said it takes 10 minutes to get washed and dressed, give yourself 11 minutes, and so on we go. You have all the different sections. Now, add to the sum total, another 10%. To this total, add another 10%. This is the time that you allow yourself to arrive at work. Why are we adding time? Invariably, we underestimate, and invariably, we do not consider delays which can always and do happen at some point. Remember, if something only happens once in 100 episodes, if you go to work 300 times a year, it will probably happen 3 times, at least. Why do we add an extra 10% twice to the total? The first time we do it is to consider that, at some point, something will go wrong. It always does when you're under pressure, doesn't it? The final 10% is to allow you to arrive early and sit down. I want you to realize 2 things, or maybe 3. When you have time on your hands where you used to be pressured, there is a sense of relaxation and a feeling of mastery and accomplishment. Instead of feeling tense and bad, we have a feeling that is pleasant and is very good. You can have a cup of coffee, you can ask somebody how they are feeling, someone you normally wouldn't ask. The second thing is to learn to enjoy wasted time. Waiting time is never wasted, if you can enjoy it. You can simply sit down and think or daydream. Within no time at all, you will have internalized this process and will not need to work it out. As I say, the beginning of the process seems strange and unreal. It's not the real you. In time, it becomes part of you and eventually you relapse. A bit of determination and a complete lack of cynicism will bring you very quickly back to where you started and improving all the time what you are doing. That was quite easy, wasn't it? One more important thing. Let's do something else which is so obvious, and yet, we don't do it. Take time to eat often, and yet, in small amounts. It's amazing that people forget that if you are slightly dehydrated or slightly hypoglycemic, you will feel anxious. Picture your automatic pilot always knows when you need to eat and drink. If the automatic pilot cannot rely on you, the pilot, to make sure that there is sufficient glucose at hand, what is it going to do? It is going to stock up whenever it can. It is going to splurge and binge on fuel and maybe water. Having sufficient energy on board is very important. We have 2 gauges working which show us when we have had enough. One is very accurate and one far less so. The inaccurate one, which exaggerates, is the feeling of fullness in your stomach. By the time it kicks in, we have loaded some more. Remember that you are probably a fast eater. You will see why in a minute, and as you binge, you stretch your stomach so that the gauge is creeping upward. The accurate gauge is the one we have in our cheeks. Have you ever seen anybody who eats very slowly and is overweight? I never have, and I seriously doubt that you have. This is because they get their satiation by chewing and swallowing only after they have thoroughly chewed. I want to say 2 things. First of all, when eating, always drink a glass of water before you start so that you can quiet the demands the stomach is making and leave your mouth, the accurate gauge, to take control. If, when eating, you feel hunger pangs, put down your fork and drink water. The second thing is to chew slowly and meticulously. I always tell my patients to stop swallowing. If you can, never swallow again in your life. You will lose weight and become the natural weight you should be. How is this done? Chew and chew until what you have masticated can no longer be held in your mouth. By the force of gravity, the food automatically slides down the gullet. It usually takes about 20 chews, at least. You now masticate for a longer period, and the longer you are gaining oral satisfaction, there will come a time when, eventually, the desire to eat and to satisfy your stomach's cravings will diminish. You will feel some need to eat, but there will be less of the hunger pangs, just the feeling of hunger that you should normally be feeling if you hadn't binged. Summary. We have undergone a very basic change in behavior and it is hard to maintain. There will be many relapses and often, one has to return to basics. Nevertheless, there will be times when you can eat automatically without having to think, am I full or am I not full? Your body will tell you. You will become more aware of your bodily sensations, and yet, more in tune with how to handle them. Hunger very much reminds me of what we are doing when we are ignoring what our bodies are telling us. Eventually, the body takes over and behaves severely. You should not deny hunger, because if you do, the automatic pilot stops trusting you and will start binging all over again. By the way, this is one of the best diets I know because, like other forms of CBT, it not only handles the problem as it arises, but far more importantly, it stops it from coming back quickly. When it does come back, and it will come back, then there is no need to panic. One simply gets back on the horse. We have said that this neurotic process is virtually a change for the worse in the way the patient feels, behaves and thinks. They are no longer unhappy. They are miserable, the mood is stuck and their functioning is deteriorating. let us discuss specific ways of helping our patient reduce tension. Tension reduction techniques. Very often, the patient will complain of a thought which keeps returning and is driving them mad. This can be particularly so in PTSD. Let's take the first and easiest step. If you are feeling distraught by something that seems to be overwhelming and overpowering, remember one thing. The time of the second thought will be over in probably 6 seconds. I know it seems like a lifetime, and I know that the thought can be unbearable. Nevertheless, be reassured that even if it's an intrusive thought of PTSD, an anxiety attack, or desire to smoke a cigarette when you are withdrawing, the acute attack, the pang is about 6 seconds long. You just have to get through 6 seconds. In all probability, it will come back seconds later. But it doesn't matter. The minute you have mastery, even if it is temporary, you are better off than you were before when you felt as if you were at complete mercy to a thought. Tell the patient to count to 6 slowly, or count to 10 if you want to count quickly. If this is not enough, try giving a gentle flick to the skin between your thumb and your first finger. That works too. I'm not going to cheat you and tell you that this is going to stop everything. It isn't. The sensation will come back repeatedly, and sometimes, it may even seem that the more you concentrate on driving it away, the more aware you are that it is there. It is as if the body has decided not to give up on something which is making you suffer. Don't worry, this too will pass in time, and it's not such a long time. Another thing I do, which I find greatly relieving and drives my wife nuts, is to use the principle that stroking is always nice. Obviously, you cannot stroke yourself in public without appearing to be a little strange, putting it mildly. The tips of your fingers are particularly sensitive, and you can run them gently around the back of your hand and people probably wouldn't notice, except my wife. I particularly enjoy rubbing the tips of my fingers against each other gently. As I say, apart from your spouse, no one would notice. Another way of reducing tension is to use relaxation and spin-offs. I'm going to explain how to do this right now. Relaxation techniques. Initially, you have to practice. The basic unit of what we are about to do, by the way, we call this relaxation, consists of 3 simple actions. Flex to the count of 6, keep attendance to the count of 6, and relax to the count of 6. We apply this basic action consecutively to each part of the body as follows: the basic action to your right leg, your left leg, your right thigh, your left thigh, your buttocks, your abdomen, your chest and shoulder muscles, your right arm and hand, your left arm and hand, your neck, and finally, all the muscles in your face. Now apply the basic action to your whole body stress and relax every muscle group. Now, close your eyes and count your breaths until you have breathed in slowly 100 times. Sit like this for what you believe to be 5 minutes. Be aware of the breath moving through your nostrils and the beating of your heart. It doesn't matter if 5 minutes passes or hasn't. What is important is this is how you would estimate 5 minutes. This basic action you can use any time and any place where you wish to fully relax. You can use it to go to sleep, if you have trouble falling asleep. Let's take it a little bit deeper. Now, I want you to go over all the basic aspects of the relaxation, the 6-second trimuscular contraction relaxation maneuver over each part of your body and every part of your body followed by 100 breaths. At this point, I want you to imagine as if there is a fly in the room and you can hear it moving. I don't want you to see or feel the fly, I just want you to imagine as if it is there. Count 20 breaths. Now, imagine that there is a balloon pulling up your right arm and making it light. I don't want you to believe that this is happening. I want you to imagine that it is happening and let your arm simply go up, even though you know full well it is only imagination. Go with it. Sadly, the string to the balloon is cut. Let your arm fall. I know it's imagination. You are not hypnotized. You are nowhere near being hypnotized. The point is that we are trying to deepen your sense of relaxation. Well done. You have reached a new level of relaxation. Practice this for a couple of nights. We're going to deepen it even more. How? Let me show you. Do as we have done above for 3 nights. On the 4th night, I want you to simply sit on the chair. Close your eyes. Obviously, there is nothing to disturb you. Now, I want you to go through all the stages we have described above and not perform any one of them, but just imagine them being done. Go through the stages 3 times in your head. You will be surprised how quickly you are able to do it, but nevertheless, you will reach the same level of relaxation or want pretty close to it. Now, repeat the imagination process of the extended relaxation process again, and imagine at the end you are simply stroking yourself. Repeat this practice of the imaginary full-scale relaxation with the stroking. Now open your eyes and stroke whatever you stroke, unobtrusively. Practice stroking without the relaxation, and see if you can obtain an almost similar sense of transient relaxation without actually doing it. Practice this repeatedly, and in a month or maybe even less, you will get to the stage where you are able to calm yourself down without anybody noticing, unless it's my wife and maybe yours. The technique above is a great way of simply sitting for 20 minutes in a quiet room, getting yourself into deep relaxation and letting your mind wander wherever or whenever it so wants. Never force a thought away, and never go into it in any meaningful way, unless you feel the thought is leading the way. Obviously, I would fully recommend yoga, and I will tell you a story. I was quite into chamomile tea. I have no doubt about its ability to calm, and certainly settle, an irritable stomach. I use chamomile tea about 3 times a day. It is amazingly sedative, especially if you leave it in the cup for about an hour and drink it cold. Bearing this in mind, I started looking up different remedies and discovered there was a girl in Ornat, my village, who dabbled in Chinese medicine. I went to see Salat Daphne, the good lady's name, to buy some herbal medicine. She suggested I do acupuncture, and I told her it was a load of rubbish. After one session, to prove that she was not right, I saw that I was completely wrong. Acupuncture works. It certainly brought me to a level of relaxation which was verging on hallucinating, but in the positive sense of the word, it was an absolute wonderful feeling. So, if you think that acupuncture might help, or even if you're positive it cannot, give it a try. From Salat, I became acquainted with the incredible Miral Sadeh. Now, my wife and I had been learning yoga from her for over 2 years. Yoga has a very clear place in any relaxation regime. One last point, exercise regularly, at least for 30 minutes every day. A gentle walk is quite enough. You do not have to pant or break sweat. Just enough to daydream. Use the same course, go on your own, and do not take a phone or a Walkman. I have been doing this regularly for 43 years, first thing in the morning. It works, incorporate it into your time allocation program. In this day and age, unfortunately, alternative therapies are still considered to be alternative. If I had my way, medication would be the alternative therapy and only used as a last resort. When would that be? I tell my patients, if your mood is permanent, and if you get anxious or depressed and the mood is not changing your quality of life for the better. If it is stopping you from functioning in any particular sphere, then you should consider medications, if you're not prepared to try the alternative therapies, which I suggest you should. If your mood is stuck, you must try an alternative. How you do this, I have mentioned above. Unfortunately, most of mankind will take the easy way out offered by the pharmaceutical companies, and that which I do not trust to recommend, but realize I am in a very small minority. Before going down this road, I would strongly recommend that you find a psychiatrist that understands medications, the side effects and the risks that you are taking. I want to emphasize those risks. There is an increased risk of suicide. You wait, no doubt you will see your sexual drive diminished, your sleep will change, and you will have more vivid dreams, though these may be thought to be nightmares. You do not increase the well-being that you would get if you were to use CBT, and finally, there are changes in your brain which will make the stopping of the medication difficult. On trying to stop, you go into a sort of withdrawal. The withdrawal may appear as a relapse, as if you really need the medication. Before choosing, remember that whoever recommends medications is doing so as part of their strong belief system. To many, but thankfully not all psychiatrists, what I have stated is pure heresy. Not every psychiatrist has the same belief system. I often mention PTSD as a neurosis. Do you remember in Ephraim's story I mentioned Adi? Adi is the reason I have the ability to write. My story about Adi, an almost accidental Rambo, was the first attempt at writing. It is his case history told differently, and is about a man I had nothing but the deepest respect and, dare I say, love? Adi was an unsung hero. In the case history, his name was Eric. Pentothal, the truth drug, was a regime we used. I sat watching Rambo. Now, what the hell has Rambo got to do with you? Because Rambo happened. I want to tell as many people as I can about the accidental Rambo I met. I met Eric in October 1974. A tall, almost emaciated Yemenite soldier. He was admitted to our shell shock unit. He had been in a general psychiatric hospital, where he had thrown the director into a decorative pool. To the director's credit, he got out and threw Eric in the pool. Then he sent this misfit to our unit of complete misfits, the shell shock unit. Eric was almost mute. All he would say was incomprehensible. We could follow nothing. So, I gave him Pentothal. Until Eric, we could always trace the cause of the trauma and recycle in a way that somehow made it psych-digestible. But Eric just went berserk. In those awful long nights, I was obsessed by the mayhem that we were seeing. Why was it not working? An injection, then complete chaos. Until then, it had been the opposite. I had to get Eric back. And I could not. Then one night, I reasoned like this. Eric, under Pentothal, is virtually psychotic. So why not give him an injection of anti-psychotic intravenously? At midnight, I phoned up my boss and asked permission. Tomorrow, I would inject both Pentothal and an antipsychotic. At 8 in the morning, we started. In went the Pentothal and we lost Eric again to his demons. In went the antipsychotic and Eric stated repeatedly, "Carol, how big he is. So small he is." That was it. Nothing more. But something. Like all successful Pentothals, Eric woke up. But this time, I was at a loss as to what had happened. I asked him how big he was, how small he is meant. Who is Carol? Eric simply looked amazed. How do you know? Did I say that? As in a very few other Pentothals, we had gone to the wrong place in time. The wrong trauma. With Ephraim, we had blundered into Auschwitz. With a hysterical blind victim, Mike, we had found ourselves in a tank battle in 1971. With Shalom, we were in a Moroccan prison. Eric had gone back to 1967, the Six-Day War. Eric had a son called Shai. Shai, his only son, had died before the Six-Day War started. In the Six-Day War, Eric was a non-combatant. He was a driver of the burial corps. He was present when the clergy tried to piece enough body parts to bury. Sometimes, there were not enough. What was there, they put in ammunition caskets, nailed that in the coffin and filled the rest with earth to make up the weight. Carol was Eric's neighbor. There was barely enough of Carol, a very tall guy, to put in the ammunition box. Eric sat by his friend Carol's coffin all night. He asked Carol to look out for his dead son Shai when they met. He muttered to himself, "Well, you know what? After all, Carol was very tall and now there was not enough to fill the ammunition box." Eric and all his unit had sworn to keep the secret of what happened when preparing the dead that week. The chief military rabbi then made them swear an oath never to tell. Honor the dead and their memory. But Eric had told under Pentothal. 6 years had passed. Inadvertently, he had told us. In his eyes, this was unforgivable. I want to jump forward a month. We worked a lot with Eric and made real progress. The chief military rabbi in the Yom Kippur War visited us. It was a warm spring afternoon. We sat on the grass and the rabbi answered questions. Eric asked if what he had done was excusable. Eric was well known and respected. So, there was a very heavy silence. The rabbi turned to his 2 assistants. "I now declare this a rabbinical court and we are now in session. Eric Hanukkah, cover your head." The rabbi then placed his hand on Eric's head. "This court absolves you from all your oaths that you took in 1967. This court absolves you from all guilt." Eric said, "Rabbi, these guys have fought hard, but I have still to explain why Rambo. What happened in 1973? First, a bit of history and a brief explanation. The Egyptians were helped by the Sudanese Commando Brigade as they crossed the canal. In accordance with Soviet doctrine, They were doped to their eyeballs with Ritalin. The Sudanese were the bane of our soldiers' existence. They were big, fearless, with bulging ferocious eyes. They were unstoppable. Well, almost unstoppable. Eric stopped one. But, at what a price? Here's how. Eric was a tank driver. They were trying to stop the Egyptian advance. They were surrounded by Sudanese. The Sudanese were unstoppable. They were like a swarm of locusts and they were everywhere. Eric's tank commander was a greenhorn. This irritated Eric, who felt he had a liability and responsibility. Eric wanted to get everyone home safely. He drove over Sudanese. He mowed them down. Eric was doing well. He was getting out of the mess. Then it went awfully wrong. The tank commander sat half out of the tank. A Sudani killed him. Eric went after the Sudani. Eric got out of the tank and fired a machine gun at the Sudani. The Sudani kept coming. Eric was screaming at him, "Die, you are already dead." More rounds and still the Sudani is running. So, with one long burst, Eric cut the Sudani into two. But still, the legs of the Sudani kept running. Eric passed out and was mute. Months passed by. The treatment was working. Eric then did something that no other soldier of mine did. He went back into reserve duty. My mistake maybe, but also fate played a hand. Eric was posted to almost the exact spot where he had fought his Sudani. By then, it was the demarcation line between the Israelis and Egyptians. Eric dissociated. He saw the Sudani and Eric attacked. Eric was running, weaving and firing as he advanced on the now docile Egyptians. There was only one way to stop him. We ran Eric over with a command car. In the turmoil, Eric was shot in the leg. There was an inquiry. There always is. This one was fair. The investigators told me that Eric was a few yards from single-handedly starting the war again. There was grudging admiration for Eric's soldiers' craftsmanship. My mistake was generously overlooked. The authorities let it pass. I went to see Eric in hospital. The orthopedic surgeon asked me if this was another faked malingerer's suicide. I told him that it was not. No, this was a real genuine Israeli hero. To this day, that brings tears to my eyes. Eric almost started another war. But his own never ended. The Sudani never left him. He drifted. Eric was in and out of trouble. Often, they wanted to put Eric in a closed ward. I stopped them. But it was getting harder. Eric's wife and neighbors were all suffering from his outbursts and wild behavior. Then one day, the police phoned. It was 3 in the morning. They were laughing at this lunatic that admitted to a murder. Did he murder someone? I asked, a bit nervously. The reply was negative, only some Sudani, accompanied by more laughter. I said okay, tomorrow we'll put him into the closed ward, and I put the phone down. Then it hit me. So, I phoned back to the police. Are you sure that he said a Sudani? I replied, yes. Very sure. At 3:30 in the morning, I got Eric out of the holding cell. You realize that the Sudani is dead, no more nightmares. I took him home. Nothing sensational. We were both very tired of everything. Things got reasonably manageable, but never anywhere like normal. Eric made a living as a taxi driver. Very rarely, I saw him. One day, a journalist came to my clinic. She asked if what she had heard was true. A taxi driver had told her his story without identifying himself. He had picked her up as a fare by the clinic. How did she find me? Eric had said that whenever he felt bad, he would drive by the clinic. He knew if things got really bad, he could always go in. That was enough for him. Eric's wife died of cancer, and so did Eric. They are all together with Shai, Carol, and the 2 rabbis. Wars are fought and paid for by heroes. But, heroes who did not ask to be heroes. Eric was an accidental hero and a great guy. I don't know what this story did to you. If you think on Eric for a minute, that is good. I sent this to people I know well, people I don't know well, people that will understand and people that will not. If anyone is offended, well, I am sorry. I simply wanted to share and honor Eric. I hope that you do, too. 40 years later, and I still mentally salute Eric. God rest his soul.